All right, welcome back to another episode of the MiniBrute 2 cookbook tutorial series that I'm doing, where I go through the cookbook, cook up all the recipes, see how they taste, put a little extra razzle dazzle on them maybe, and go from there, right? So today's episode is the Vision Bass by J.B. Arthus. It's a huge sounding bass patch suitable for modern drum and bass and other electric genres. Turn down the amplitude AM2 knob to hear a sound only if a key is pressed. I've played around with this one a little bit, and it's kind of hard to explain. It's a whole lot of layers and things kind of playing together, and I think this is another one of those recipes where they cooked it up and then maybe modified the synth ever so slightly, because I don't know that it 100% works the way I'm expecting it to, but that might just be my understanding or misunderstanding of what's supposed to happen. So as always, we're going to start with a neutral patch with nothing going on. I already have it, all blanked out back to default. Anyway, so we're going to start with a neutral patch with nothing in it, and we're going to start in the upper left-hand corner and just work our way across. And when things connect to other things, we will talk about them as we go. Okay. So to start with, we're going to have LFO1 in the sine wave position. The rate somewhere around, what is that, like 10:30, 11 o'clock, not quite 11 o'clock, 10 o'clock, something like that. And the LFO1 is going to be patched into the metal modulation input. Now the metal modulation only works with the triangle wave. Let's get the triangle wave up so we can start to hear what's happening. Right now, the next thing we need to do is turn the Metallizer up so we can hear it moving, right? Or we can hear it doing stuff. If we turn that knob, we kind of get a feel for what the Metallizer is doing. Now, the way it's naturally set up at the moment is that the triangle, or the triangle wave will kind of metalize itself. All right. If you look at your metal in, that's where the synth is taking the input to the Metallizer, and then it does its thing. And the metal mod is how you're modulating what's happening. So we have the LFO1 patched into the metal modulation. So now LFO1, we turn up the metal modulation. You can hear how the metal modulation is it's changing based on how the LFO is working, right? So if we turn the LFO speed up, the rate up, we can hear it adjust as necessary. So according to the recipe, we want the Metallizer around the same kind of spot as the rate for the LFO1, the modulation somewhere around there too. This is going to be one of those, you're going to have to like adjust that to taste and figure out the flavor that you want on that, okay? So the next thing we want to add into the sound is the square wave. So we're going to give that about 50%. Now I'm going to take this triangle wave out so we can hear what the square wave is doing. Okay, turn it up just so we can hear it a little easier. Now we are going to use the pulse width modulation for the square wave, okay? Now, if you imagine the square wave itself from a fundamental standpoint, the pulse width is, I'm not sure for the MiniBrute if changing the pulse width extends the positive section of the waveform or the negative section of the waveform. I don't remember which way it goes. But when you adjust the pulse width, one side of this wave will get longer and the other side will get shorter. So, in essence, you're just decreasing the amount of time in between when it switches from a positive to a negative integer, one way or the other. I don't remember which way is which, but that's what's happening. So my experience is telling me that it's starting at a natural square wave, and as you go wider, it's actually extending the negative portion. So the positive portion is getting smaller, the negative portion is getting longer. I could be wrong. If that's wrong, then please correct me, because I'd rather give people correct information. Anywho, getting back to where the recipe calls for, about the same position as the Metallizer, all right? Now, again, we're going to use LFO1 to modulate it. Now, LFO1 is already pre-wired to go to the pulse width modulation. So all we have to do is turn that knob up until we hear where we like it. I like to go just until I hear that pulse wave start to get so deep that it kind of phases itself out. And then back it off just a little bit, just so it's a nice subtle change, okay? So now if we put this triangle and the square back together, we get some nice kind of timbre to it, right? If we adjust that rate up just a little bit, make that movement a little more pronounced, we can really hear what's happening here, right? All right, so we have the basis of our sound, all right? But we need to do some fun stuff with it. So the next thing that we're gonna do is gonna bring our frequency modulation almost all the way up. Now, that got real dirty real quick. But what we're gonna do, because the frequency modulation is pre-wired to VCO2, we're going to patch away from that because we don't actually want to use that right now. So the FM is actually going to be linked to the ADSR, okay? Now, this is where we're going to have to jump around a little bit, but, stay with me. So the ADSR envelope, which is naturally pre-wired to the FM or the frequency modulation for the cutoff, is not going to be bypassed by the fact that we're taking the output over to there. The only time it bypasses this natural connection is if you rewire something else into FM here. So when we make adjustments to the ADSR envelope, it's going to adjust how the envelope itself works. But we're only interested in the FM on the oscillator for right now. So you hear nothing's happening right now because we patched the output of the ADSR into it and the ADSR is doing nothing. So even though the FM's all the way up, nothing's happening, right? So let's change that so we can actually hear what's happening. We're just going to bring the decay up to about a little over half. And then you get that kind of laser effect, right? So right there is a nice, easy way to just get a laser effect on anything that you're doing. If we just, one oscillator, if we take that Metallizer off, like you still get that kind of idea, right? You get that sort of laser sound. So let's put everything back up how, mixed back up how it's supposed to be. Now, I think that that's actually a little bit too long. I like it a little bit lower, the decay a little lower. So it's a little less, it's just kind of like gets down to the pitch where it's supposed to be and kind of hangs out there, right? Now, because we're doing frequency modulation, the pitch is not going to be exact anyway, so you may have to do some tuning to get the synth where you need it to be. That's what the global tune is here for. It is your friend. Use it as such. Now, okay, so we got the ADSR envelope adjusting our frequency modulation on the oscillator the way we like it, the way it sounds. We like it that way, okay? So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to move right across. Right next to it is VCO2. Now, the recipe calls for VCO2 to be tuned all the way down in the sine wave position, in the all range position, okay? And we're not actually going to use any of its output, but what we are going to use is we're not going to use any of the output naturally to necessarily hear it, but we're going to take the output of oscillator 2. We're going to go into the amplitude modulation. And this is where it gets weird because remember how I said I don't think this is necessarily working the way that it was intended to. Turn the volume off for a second. Because according to the recipe, turn down the amplitude 2 knob to hear sound only if a key is pressed. Well, my amp 2 knob is down, but obviously we can still hear stuff. So I'm not sure what's happening here that's not supposed to be happening, but something is doing something it's not supposed to be doing. Now, the next part of this, though, we're gonna continue. The next part of this is that we want to adjust the pitch of oscillator 2 based on the attack and decay envelope, right? So we're gonna take the AD out into pitch. All right, now you can already hear something changing in the sound, right? Made it go faster. Well, now we can change how that works by going down to trigger, leaving it on once. Okay, so instead of the gate, it's you hit it and it triggers, and then it only plays once. We're gonna turn the decay on this up quite a bit, and you can hear. I'm gonna turn this back down again, so you can hear when you hit the note, it the oscillator VCO2 is like almost down in LFO range. VCO2 is modulating the amplitude of the sound, which is being bypassed by the fact that the output is going into the amplitude modulation. So the AD is not going into the amplitude anymore, and instead we're using the amplitude into the pitch of VCO2. So that changes the characteristic of the amplitude modulation as it goes in. So that's how we get our sound. We get that sort of like that kind of, I don't know, like rolling your R, but for a synth, right? So, as of now, this is how the patch is built to be done, okay? This, again, is like, doesn't seem to be, oh, that's right, we still have the filter to do too, I'm sorry. So that we'll bring the filter cutoff down. Remember, the filter is still being affected by the ADSR envelope. We'll bring the FM up so that the ADSR can actually affect that cutoff. Give it some resonance. We're going to be up in high pass mode. And you can hear how it already gets into more of like a, using the resonance of the filter really accentuates that laser kind of feel, right? Now, personally, you know, for my money, I think the sound is a little more fun, a little bit easier to use if you use the low pass filter, you bring the cutoff down, you don't need quite as much resonance. But that's just me. Now, again, according to the recipe book, this is it. This is the sound. This is, you know, that's how it's supposed to work. Again, turn down the amplitude 2 knob to hear a sound only if the key is pressed. That's not working the way I think it's supposed to. So I'm not sure what's going on there. It's not a matter of misunderstanding what's happening, because I've gone over this particular patch a bunch of times and I have yet to set it up in a way where it doesn't like play sound on its own whenever you're not hitting a button. So I'm not sure why it's doing that or what to do about that. The only thing I can figure is that something's wrong in my synth, or the way they designed the patch. You know, they designed the patch and then they changed something in the synth before they actually released it, and or you know, he made the patch with like a prototype of the synth or whatever, or something like that. And then when they actually released it, they had changed something, some characteristic where now it doesn't work that way anymore. That might be the case. I don't know. You know, maybe if somebody else has some more information on it, it can redirect our understanding of what's happening. But that's kind of how the synth works. This is the best that I can come up with this version of the synth, with what I got in front of me. I still think it's a great sound. I still think you can do a lot of fun stuff with it, you know. You just kind of have to be careful about the timbre of what you're trying to do. You know, pay attention to the fact that it's going to try to hold that note out longer. And then, you know, make adjustments as you see fit. Adjust the Metallizer and the metal mod and the pulse width modulation and, you know, the FM, and try to find what feels and what sounds nice to you, you know? So you might even try turning the tuning of VCO2 all the way up, or, you know, a little bit higher to see if you like the timbre of that. Or try a different waveform on VCO2. You know, just try different stuff out. See what you like, see what works, and you know, just experiment, be creative, and, you know, keep turning knobs till you hear something you like, and then turn them farther. All right, well, thanks for watching. We'll catch you in the next one.